Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are here for episode 12. And just like every week, we want to thank everybody who's listening and watching. And we have some new subscribers on YouTube, and I have not checked the analytics on the other things, but thank you to everybody that's watching, liking, subscribing, all the things. We appreciate you.
So what are we drinking tonight?
Yeah, start kicking it off with the wine early because we got it pushed way too far to the back.
There's a lot to go over tonight, and I'd like to drink the wine when we get through this.
Absolutely. Tonight we are drinking the 2018 Silver Reserve Lagrange. We've had one other Lagrange on the podcast, and they're not usually our favorites from our boxes of Tobin James. Nothing against them, just they're not usually our favorites, but this is from our fresh shipment that we just got last week, 2 weeks ago. So we are trying a fresh one to see how we feel.
Try it like as it's meant to be, I guess, because I don't know how great we are at aging wines. So let's
We're trying to be better. Smells like Welch's grape juice.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. I was like, there's a sweetness there. It's familiar. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's the grape juice.
And I will say, when I was pouring the glasses, it was very dark in color, very purple dark.
Very viscous. Tastes kind of thick. I'm not getting too much from the taste though. I want to say that the Lagranges we've had in the past have kind of had like more of an acidic, almost like tart, trending towards sour taste. That this doesn't have that.
No, not that I've
bold.
really had grape jelly before, but I guess like the thickness of jelly and that grapey flavor is really what's standing out to me.
Yeah, it feels very dark too, or looks very dark. Interesting. I'm excited to see
how it opens up.
Yeah, with a little bit of oxygen. Cool.
All right, and now
time to go behind the screens.
This is just a reminder, this is our new segment where we go behind the big screens of Hollywood and learn more about some aspect of film production or storytelling.
And this week we are going to be learning about Best Boy, because I see that all the time in the credits and I don't really know what it is. There's a lot of terms that I see in there and that I don't really know what role they play in the movie making, filming aspect of it. So this week I want to focus on Best Boy. And judging by the Wikipedia description, I think there's a lot more roles we're going to have to understand before we really understand what the Best Boy does, because there is apparently a Best Boy Electric and a Best Boy Grip. And
that's why we have this segment, right? To learn all these things.
But there's a lot of terms that I'm going to throw out there, and I don't know what they mean yet, but I'm excited to find out. The one of them reports to the gaffer, and the other one reports to the key grip.
Okay, key grip was on my list of ones that we needed to look up for this segment.
And it appears that they basically don't have like a clearly defined role. They're just kind of like a do everything, in charge of like production, the set, the lighting, getting everything in place, just running around doing all the various odds and ends chores. Some of them are in charge of staffing. It appears that the name Best Boy essentially comes from like the main, stagehand's apprentice, who would have been a boy, and it would be their best boy to go and run and do all of these things.
It just makes me think of a puppy. Good boy, the best boy.
The best boy.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought about. But that kind of also fits into my mental picture of it, like someone who just like runs around and does everything. A little puppy that's like running around.
Yeah,
doing all.
It's like,
of stuff.
get me your best like assistant, to someone who can actually get these things done, these various tasks, chores, last second errands to get things or set something up. Make sure that everyone's here on time and run around doing all those things on set. And they can specialize. Usually there's a Best Boy Electric and Best Boy Grip, like I said. So they kind of, one I guess is more in charge of the grip, which I don't entirely know what that entails. And
tune in next week for Behind the Screens.
So I think as we go further down that, it'll make a bit more sense, but that's what a Best Boy is.
Well, thank you for enlightening us. And from the general idea of what I understand what this role is, it makes sense that you would need someone to kind of do all the odds and ends and get all that stuff together.
And one funny little final tidbit there is that in the movie Airplane 2, in the credits, they credited the Best Boy, and then after that, they had the Worst Boy that they credited Adolf Hitler with.
Oh, no.
So just as a little Easter egg there in the credits.
Yikes.
So that's Behind the Screens.
Awesome. can't wait for next week. And now it's time for Slept on It. So last week we watched
The Fugitive.
The Fugitive. Why is this? I cannot remember the movies we watched the week before. Normally I write it in here and I slip in this week. Anyways, last week you rated it a 6 and I rated it a 7. Has your rating changed since last week?
Yeah, I'll go with 6.5. I think thinking back more to it and kind of now understanding a bit more about the background of it, which I'll get into in a little bit, I can appreciate more how the movie was made, why it was made, and done the way it was.
Yes. And I think if anything, from what I've learned from my deep dives, I would probably back it up to a 6.5. I think I liked the general type of story and it was very interesting and there was a lot to follow. It was just a lot for a movie. And like we talked about last week, it was either like too rushed in some places or just like too much shoved into the whole movie that it felt like it was really dragged out. That I think I was a little excited with my 7. That I think 6.5 is a happy medium for both of us.
We'll meet there, both at a 6.5.
All right, and now some deep dives. You want me to get started?
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
All right, so some of the things we talked about last week, we mentioned that this was yet another movie set in Chicago that also featured a parade in downtown Chicago. So I wanted to just look into that just a little bit because we talked a lot in the Ferris Bueller's Day Off episode about how are there weekday parades in Chicago? Is that a thing? And the Von Steuben Day Parade that Ferris Bueller's Day Off was filmed during was on a Saturday. So there was not a weekday parade, but the parade in The Fugitive was on Wednesday, March 17th because it was St. Patrick's Day Parade. So it had to be.
That makes sense. It was a holiday. It still seems very impractical.
Yeah, I completely agree. But a little bit more information on that is that the temperature was apparently 21 degrees that day with a wind chill factor of minus 6. So it was freezing that day. So on top of it being a Wednesday in downtown Chicago in the middle of a parade and it being freezing, there was also a second movie that was filming scenes in this parade at the same time. So the movie. What is
it with parades in Chicago and movies?
Apparently it's a thing. Something I'll have to keep looking at.
You did go a lot deeper on that.
Right? So the movie Blink was also filming scenes during the same parade. And so on top of that, there was 2 camera crews that were trying to weave in and out of this parade at the same time. So.
Crazy. Must have been fun planning that parade. Like, hey, we're going to have all these floats and everything. And on top of that, 2 movies filming. Good luck.
No pressure, everybody.
Trying to go as a marching band, you're trying to play your music. Meanwhile, Harrison Ford's running in between.
Weaving in and out of the crowd. Yeah. And then something else we talked about is how the Chicago Sun-Times was now mentioned in Never Been Kissed, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and The Fugitive. And we were kind of joking last week that is this like a fake newspaper that we've been referencing because it's in all these movies, but it is in fact a real paper.
Oh, wow. So and some free publicity there.
We haven't looked silly. And it has been in circulation since 1948 and it is the second largest in circulation in Chicago behind the Chicago Tribune. Sorry, everybody. Behind the Chicago Tribune.
Tribune is the word you're looking for.
Oh, gosh. That's the one sip of wine went right to my head. So it is a real newspaper. We are not silly.
Interesting.
We'll see if we keep seeing it.
Interesting because I feel like most movies would make up like a similar sounding one, like the Chicago Post or something, which might be another one. Who knows?
Yeah. And then I have one more, and we talked about the train crash scene and how I thought it looked really real, and you weren't sure because you were like, why would you derail a whole train? And it, in fact, was a real train crash. They went to Dillsboro, North Carolina to film this on the Great Smoky Mountain Railway, and it was a real bus and a real train, and they are still on the side of the tracks today.
They just left them there?
Yeah. So you can go, and I will.
And now it's an Airbnb.
Honestly, not too much longer. Probably. It might be. So I will link a picture to that in our stories on Instagram at @CauldronIPod next week because you can see some of the like rusty train and bus on the side of the.
Well, next time I'm in the area.
But we talked about how like CGI was not that good, but also why would you wreck an entire train? And I should have gone a little deeper into like how they actually executed it, but they did in fact.
It's some overeager best boys that were like, I can do it. Leave it to me.
Yes. All right.
So yeah, I don't remember exactly why, but I remember last week talking about Harrison Ford and his aviation hobby and whatnot. And apparently when he was younger, he had tried to learn to fly planes, but couldn't afford it because it cost a whole $15 an hour, which is the equivalent of like $150 nowadays. But still, like he started learning, gave it up, and then after I guess he became wealthy and in the 90s decided to actually follow through and to learn how to fly planes. And so he's been flying fixed wing planes and helicopters ever since.
Oh man. Both. He has both licenses.
Yeah. And at one point, he's been known to like do search and rescue. And there was a story where he picked up a dehydrated and like disoriented hiker, and she was so disoriented that she got in the helicopter, didn't know like where she was or what was going on, threw up all over his like helmet. I guess in the back seat, and it took her a while to realize that it was Harrison Ford that had picked her up. I feel like I would have like assumed it's a mirage or something, but she was so embarrassed that happened. Like, what a story to tell there.
I would be too.
And he still is flying as of 2020. He's had a couple like kind of mishaps. I think people were kind of calling for him to stop a bit because it seems like he's been a bit reckless. In one incident recently, he landed on a taxiway instead of the runway. And
Yikes.
Yeah, has had a couple other like kind of near misses. And actually early on, he actually was flying around with Clint Eastwood, and their helicopter broke down in Bangor, Maine. So their helicopter or their plane, and they just spend the night there at a hotel. But just imagine like in the middle of nowhere, all of a sudden Harrison Ford and Clint Eastwood walk in. I would have felt like I was in a movie or something. But
definitely,
yeah. He loves his planes, and I guess does not want to give it up, even though he's 80 now. So I feel like at some point you probably should say, "Hey, I'm not doing this very safely."
Yep. Think of the others around you, and
all
the people underneath you when you're flying.
Do some sort of like continuing certification for a plane, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah, I'd hope that kind of gets taken away once it's clearly not safe. And the last thing was The Fugitive. You mentioned it being a series, and it was in the 60s. And the show, actually, the finale of the Fugitive, it ran for 4 seasons. The finale of the show was like the highest rated and viewed like episode for like 20 years after that. Oh, man. And apparently it was like a really big thing. And the show was actually based on a real life murder.
Oh man, the layers of this.
Of a doctor who was like at his beach house or something, and went to bed, heard like a loud noise, saw some one-armed man. Actually, I don't think this was a one-armed man. In the Fugitive show, it was a one-armed man. I think he just saw like a figure, a shape, he said, that was like attacking his wife. He fought the guy off, got like knocked out, came to, got knocked out again or something, and just claimed that he did not do this, didn't do this. It became a huge like media trial that was not really given a fair shake. He was found guilty and then retried, and eventually like the judge was like, there's clearly no evidence of you actually committing this murder. So he was eventually found not guilty, went on to become a professional wrestler, and died.
Plot twist, I was not prepared for that.
At the young age of 47.
And he went through all that appeal and trial and all that stuff, became a professional wrestler all before 47.
Mm-hmm. And then later, in his son had his dad's body exhumed in I think like the 90s or something. Once DNA evidence became a big thing, and he was found not guilty.
Ooh, you had me on the edge of my seat there for a second.
That the DNA evidence apparently proved his innocence.
Oh man!
So it's kind of crazy, all that kind of building on each other. But one interesting thing about the show is that the studios had kind of like lost interest in the show, and they were just planning on finishing the show and not doing anything special for the series finale, just kind of making it like any other episode of him just like coming closer and closer to finding out who the killer was. But they ended up kind of overruling the studio and made an actual episode that actually wrapped everything up with the one-armed man and was able to kind of tie up all of the loose ends and save the day there. But one thing that made me appreciate the movie based on the fact that it was kind of this TV show is that a lot of the episodes, I guess, were a lot of mini storylines of leading to various plot lines about the murder and the conspiracy and all that behind that. And the way they made the movie is they kind of like made up as they went the script and kind of made up scenes, made up storylines. The whole pharmaceutical thing was made up last minute.
Oh man.
And that the actors and the writers and director kind of like just made things up, and they were like making up lines as they were doing the scenes. It was so much ad lib that it kind of was like they were making up a TV show as they went along, and then kind of formed it into a movie. So when you look at it that way, kind of the fact that they were able to weave this whole cohesive story, even though it kind of seems far-fetched with the whole pharmaceutical conspiracy, the fact that it kind of was just bolted on as they were making it was pretty impressive and pretty well done.
That is really cool. So I wonder if they shot in order so that they could facilitate stories like that, or if it was just
how much
they
like cut or how much recut, how much was fixed in post or anything. But
interesting.
It's kind of like a whole lot going on there, like based on a a TV show that was based on a real murder and just everything going on with that.
So I also did a little bit of research on the series. I did not actually come across anything that you came up with, so that was all very interesting. But one thing I did want to add is that the first 3 seasons were shot in black and white, and the final season was in color. And I thought that was really cool because you talked about how it gave you the like old school noir film vibe, and to know that the series was shot in that black and white, maybe not as dramatic style as that, but I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I'd like to go down the noir film rabbit hole sometime.
I'm here for it.
Check out some of those movies.
But also just doing the research and reading the plot line of the plot summary from the Wikipedia page of the series, and be like, okay, I see why this movie was as long and as like weaving and twisty turny as it was, because it was pretty close to what the series was.
Yeah, and it kind of felt like it was a TV show that kind of was made into a movie. The way that kind of like was exciting, kind of unbelievable, a lot of like various moving parts there. But yeah,
it was a good movie, and now we're ready to jump into this week.
Yep.
What are we watching?
Turn the page to Erin Brockovich from 2000.
So we're switching decades again. We talked about staying in the 90s. This was basically in the 90s.
Sure, it was filmed in the 90s.
For sure. And it is rated R. So interested to see what a 2000s R movie is compared with The Breakfast Club that was also rated R in the 80s. And do you want to take us on our little bit of time travel back to the 2000s?
The time machine there.
I will work on a sound effect for you, I promise.
That wasn't good enough. You can just cut that out and make that a sound effect.
Hey, I'm here for it.
So back in the year 2000, the top 3 movies released that year were How the Grinch Stole Christmas. That's the Jim Carrey version.
Oh, yes. Love it.
Grossing $253 million. Mission Impossible 2, grossing $215 million. And Gladiator, grossing $186 million. Just a really weird thing of those 3 movies coming out the same year. Doesn't seem right to me, but I guess that was the time. The top 3 songs released that year were Breathe by Faith Hill, Smooth by Santana, which I feel like has been around forever, but
hey, 23 years. That's a really long time.
And Maria Maria by Santana. Big year for Santana.
For sure. That definitely takes me back. I feel like this one really actually mentally takes me back, since we were 9-10 years old in 2000. And I remember a lot of these movies coming out.
I feel like my mom and maybe my sister went to see it. I obviously wouldn't have gone to see it as a rated R movie, and would have been like 9 or 10.
Have you seen it before?
I have not.
I have not either. But like you, I feel like I remember hearing people talking about it, and people, oh, I saw Erin Brockovich. I remember the hype of this one.
Well, what do you know about the movie?
I know it has Julia Roberts in it. I believe she works in the legal field to some extent. And I want to say it's like environmental issues, or like fighting for some kind of like legal environmental battle is what I think I know about the movie. I feel very confident about Julia Roberts, and everything else is.
But I believe she actually is a real person. This is like a true story. And she was apparently protesting at the railroad derailment chemical leakage thing in, I guess, Ohio recently, because I saw her name come up. So I assumed it was going to be something kind of environmental related there too, based on that. Otherwise, I would have assumed it was like a murder case or something. Also,
based on what you just said, I thought you were talking about she protested the train derailment of the Fugitive. Oh. And I was going to be like, oh my God, this all comes together. Circle. But different times. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm excited to, drink a little more of this wine, get a little deeper into that, and to finally see this movie that I've definitely heard a lot about, and see how right we are with our guesses.
Yeah. Let's check it out.
Erin Brockovich. Right. Erin Brockovich. You were just waiting for me to say it, were you?
Gotta say the name before and after each part. That was 2 hours and 12 minutes of Erin Brockovich.
You can clearly tell that we're exhausted parents of 2 small children.
It's a very high-paced, action-packed movie there.
That we just, anytime a movie's over 2 hours, we're like, okay. Anyways, we're going to start with the wine.
Yeah. Wine, I'm going to go 5.
Okay, I had 6.1, but I think our scales are similar.
Yeah, the wine scale is the fact that it, like, 0 is still a good wine, 10 being like absolutely amazing, but like a less than 8 doesn't mean that it's a bad wine. This is all weighted for like good wines. A 5. I didn't really see anything too remarkable about it. It was pleasant. It wasn't too like tart or tannic or anything. Just a fine wine.
Yeah. It was not my favorite, but I mean, it was still good. We did have the 2017, I believe, Lagrange in the Top Gun episode. And that one we rated like a 7 and a 6.2, something along those lines. I don't really remember it. I didn't listen to the whole description.
I imagine I probably like this one better than that one, even though the scores don't necessarily reflect that. It just, I don't know, didn't do much for me.
Yeah. It was a little alcohol forward for me.
I just don't know if I'm a big Lagrange person.
Yeah. I think we're just, it's not our wine.
Mm-hmm. So.
Anyways. It was still like, I mean, it was not undrinkable. It's
offered to me in like if someone's like, hey, drink this Lagrange, I'm not going to be like, I will not drink this nice wine. I'm just probably not going to like go out of my way to get it at a grocery store, but it's good.
Yeah. All right. And onto your movie rating out of 10.
Movie rating, a 4.2.
I gave it a 6.1. Is that what I gave the wine to? God, I can't even remember. I just said it.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, like, I didn't find it super quotable. I'm not really going to rewatch it. I didn't find too much that I really enjoyed about it. It seemed kind of like slow, fairly predictable, not super interesting. It was like, oh, she's at the law firm. Oh, she's at this, like, talking to clients. Oh, it's going back. Like, it just didn't seem like it was really, that interesting. It being based on a true story, it's like they're not going to embellish too much there. But
I mean, I found it interesting. I was intrigued by the story.
Mm-hmm.
Something about the like come from behind rags to riches type of story was interesting.
I'm more intrigued to like learn her story for real.
Well, obviously we're going to deep dive that for next week. Spoiler alert. But I mean, I agree. Like it was not super quotable. I don't really want to rewatch it because it was long, but I mean, I'm glad I've seen it and I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I didn't love it, but I thought it was good. Like it was, I didn't think it was a bad movie by any means.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to move into the movie description?
Yes, I finally updated our outline so it doesn't say Wikipedia
anymore. It's the Andrew description versus the whatever source the TV has description.
Go for it.
Yeah, so Erin Brockovich comes to work at a law firm, discovers a case about a giant corporation doing some less than acceptable practices regarding the chemicals that are leaching into the lands around some sort of town. And they try to pay off the people that live there so they don't get sued. Erin Brockovich puts 2 and 2 together with the medical reports and the land reports that are trying to be bought by this company, finds out that they were not doing the right thing and that they're trying to cover it up. And it turns into a huge lawsuit. Everyone in the town gets millions. She gets millions. And they ride off into the sunset, I guess.
Well done. Right off into the sunset. Amazing. All right. According to the television up here, it says a twice divorced mother of 3 who sees an injustice takes on the bad guys and wins. Spoiler alert.
Sees an injustice.
With a little help.
When was the last time you saw an injustice?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I haven't finished. I have not finished that sentence. She takes on the bad guys and wins with a little help from her push-up bra. They just keep getting better every week.
Who wrote this? I want to crown them. Say that sentence over again.
I'm going to start over again. I wasn't ready for the end. And you always talk about how I have the easy job. But this, you never expect it. Okay, I'm going to read that. I'm going to start over again.
Fucking ghost.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm going to start over again. A twice divorced mother of 3 who sees an injustice. I know it's coming now. Takes on the bad guys and wins.
But how did she do it? Did she do it on her own? What came to her aid?
With a little help from can't say it. Okay.
Welcome to the evening news. Tonight's story focuses around a twice divorced mother of 3 who sees an injustice and takes on the bad guys and wins with a little help from her push-up bra. More at 6.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
What a great sentence.
Yep. With a little help from her push-up bra. Got it. Erin goes to work for an attorney and comes across medical records describing illnesses clustered in one nearby town. She starts investigating and soon exposes a monumental cover-up.
That's a very like anticlimactic ending. The first sentence just
honestly, they should have just stopped after the first sentence. Oh my goodness. Ooh, I was not ready for that.
I would watch this years ago if that was what it was presented as.
Right.
Instead of it's a legal aid.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. Whew. So, based on that, was the movie what you expected?
Yes and no. I mean, the whole with the help from a push-up bra, not as much. I imagined it was going to be a slow legal, like, discovery and finding some clues, putting things together. Like, that's more what I figured.
And like you said, with knowing it was a true story, you kind of knew it wasn't going to be something super outrageous as far as like how the story played out. It was going to be something that was rooted in realistic events.
Yeah, they talked about like getting threatening calls and all sorts of stuff. And I don't know if a big corporation would risk that in today's day and age, but like
this was also 23 years ago.
I was really like hoping it wasn't going to turn into a big like a gunman showed up at her house and motorcycle boy saved her, and it was a big like over the top non-realistic thing. But I'm sure that she probably got some sketchy calls and threatening like please drop this type stuff, but not necessarily an actual act on the violence, or else that company would be opening themselves up to a bit more than a couple $1 million in lawsuits there. How well did it age?
Fine. I mean, it's a true story. You can't change too much if it's based in real fact.
Yeah, I don't think anything didn't age well. I guess the fact that it wasn't like in today's times that she had to like get a cell phone and
I mean, I feel like technology is always going to be like a asterisk factor in those things, but
it didn't seem too dated anyway. Could it be made today? Probably be the same story based on her life.
Yep. Did
the title fit the movie?
You're not going to ask, did they say the title of the movie?
Did they say the title? Yes, they said the title. They said Erin Brockovich a couple times in there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else you would call it.
Being the fact that it was like in the 90s, 2000s era, it could have been called like Town Scandal or something in the water. Or
honestly, like, I'm really sorry. I'm disappointed in that title. You really hyped it up with the voice and all, but
Something in the
Town
Water.
Scandal was...
Something in the Water probably would have been a bit better of a title.
Ooh, Something in the Water would have been excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Erin Brockovich is fine. Mm-hmm. And it's an iconic name in itself nowadays, but Something in the Water. Ooh, love that.
But otherwise, I think it was a fine one. I always kind of wish they did like an Erin Brockovich 2 on her next case.
Ooh.
Maybe they did direct to DVD, direct to VHS. It was 2000. I don't know. Direct to both at that time.
Yeah.
Were there any actors that wanted to do bigger things? Julia Roberts was like, I guess, kind of an actress.
Yeah. I maybe heard of her.
Aaron Eckhart went on to do at least The Dark Knight that I have seen. There were a couple other like character actors. I think the other lawyer guy was in Big Fish and probably a couple other movies that I've seen.
One of the plaintiffs was the mom in Handmaid's Tale.
The mom of
June.
Yeah.
There are a lot of moms in Handmaid's Tale. The mom of June in Handmaid's Tale. There were definitely faces that were familiar, but nothing super crazy.
Yeah. The big star there obviously was Julia Roberts.
For sure.
And what impact do you think this movie had on pop culture?
It's not like I feel like this is referenced a lot or anything, and maybe it is more than we have paid attention to, but I remember the hype around this movie. Like, I remember it being a really big deal and hearing it a lot. And to skip ahead a little bit, I do feel cultured after watching it because it was something that I just feel like I heard about all the time. And I don't know if it was just from references or people watching it because we were kind of old enough to be aware at the time. I don't know.
And something about it felt kind of familiar. I don't know if there were more movies that were similar about this, of like, getting to the bottom of a case and just doing the legwork to actually talk to people, putting things together. I don't know if this was one of the trendsetters or if it was just another one of those movies, but there was something that felt very familiar about it, of like, I'm putting together some, seemingly benign facts, and as you think about them all together, you realize there's something bigger going on, or that it's all linked. but I don't think it was a huge, cultural icon or anything like some other movies that we've seen have been.
I'll be interested to see if we hear this reference at all. I don't know how many movies we're going to watch past 2000, at least to start with, but I'll be interested to see if there is any overlap at all.
And that's our questionnaire. Do you want to go on?
I'm sorry, did you feel cultured after watching it?
I'm glad I've seen it. I can say that I've seen it. The other movies we've seen so far, I feel more cultured having watched than this.
Okay, I respect that.
I put it lower down on my totem pole. Do you want to go first on your notes?
I do.
Okay.
My first note is that it's based on a true story, which means obviously we are deep diving the real story for next week, so stay tuned. I also thought it was interesting after our deep dive on opening credits last week that it did not have, it did eventually have a title sequence where it listed the production company and some of the actors and stuff, but it jumped right into the movie. There was no transition period in this movie. So it just felt like that was worth mentioning. She just dressed straight up like a hooker for work. I mean, if we had read the description of push-up bra, maybe we would have been more prepared for it, but like her see-through brow. Have I had a stroke?
Did you have like some dental work like today while I was working or something?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get it together. She was wearing a see-through blouse, and just
and I get like dressing a little bit out there, but that just kind of seems like you're trying to say something, or I don't know, just trying to make other people uncomfortable by dressing like that in a law office. I don't know.
And more power to her for feeling super confident and comfortable enough to wear that. But even just watching Julia Roberts walk around in her high heels, I felt like she just looked like not super confident in those heels. And I don't even really wear it.
Seem very practical, especially with her going out into the field, like into a well and a pool and all that sort of stuff, and walking around in the dirt. Just, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you, boo, but not for me.
Yeah.
There was a lot of really aggressive sideburns in this movie. The waterboard guy.
Sorry, every time they said waterboard, I kept thinking of waterboarding, and I just couldn't get over that. I'm like, they just keep saying waterboard so like naturally, but nowadays waterboard has a much darker connotation.
You're right. At the county water board, he had really aggressive sideburns. Motorcycle guy George had really aggressive sideburns, and that's not something I really thought of much in the 2000s. That was a little alarming for me.
I don't know. I feel like that kind of tracks with the time.
Yeah.
Like early 2000s was a big sideburns era.
Was it?
I think so.
I was only 8. I don't know how aware of the times I was. 9. But also the actual court case from the quick research I did took place in 1993. So it was a little bit before.
This was early 90s, even though it was filmed in 2000. They were trying to go on the early 90s vibes.
That makes
sense.
I was like, am I really off of when the time of this movie was? So it was a little bit before, but it was not like 20 or 30 years. It was 7 years before the movie was made. My next note is, I don't even know how to describe this headband, but I just have to talk about it because I can feel my hairs and my scalp pulling. But this headband that Julia Roberts wore, it was so big in the 2000s, and it was just like almost like a comb that just like you clipped it around in the back, and it fit in your hair. And they were always so tight, and they just pulled your scalp, and you felt like your brains were going to explode out of your head. But everybody wore them, and I'm so glad.
Must have been real comfortable to wear with your choker and whatever else.
You had to wear it with the choker. That is for sure something that happened.
Girls just love being comfortable.
And maybe some like roll-on glitter and those chunky wedge sandals. Oh my gosh. So I just quick shout out to those headbands and anybody that wore them because they were miserable. But I'm so glad she wore it in the movie. The worst. And then so back to her like traipsing around through the water plant, doing in her high heels and stuff. We are living in a post-COVID era. So, but I was like, where's her mask? Where are her gloves? She's picking up this dead frog. She's sticking her hand in this water. Even when they were just like at the Jensen's house, and she's like, do you want some coffee? I'd be like, I'm drinking nothing that comes from this house.
There's a big water scandal. I don't know if you heard about it, but I'm not going to drink your coffee made from the water here.
Nope. I would be just a lot more like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
No thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and buy like a fishing net while I fish this frog out of the pond instead of like stepping into it and picking it up with my bare hands.
Yeah. I mean, I know that she didn't have a ton of money, but I would have taken a little bit of precautions, especially being a mom. Like, let's protect my health for my children.
You just write it off.
How many days after tax day is it that we're still writing things off? Writing things off. Okay, and then her phone threat. And they were like, is this the Erin Brockovich that's blah, 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 been digging into information? Say no. Deny it. Why would you say, oh, yeah, that was me? I would just go straight into denial there.
She seems like the character she was portraying seems like someone's just going to be real tough and be like, yeah, what about it? But I would have just hung up. I also don't answer my phone, so I wouldn't have answered my phone.
The 2000s/90s were a different time. You answered your phone.
I don't know. They still had answering machines.
True. But yeah, I mean, as soon as she said yes, my first thought was, you absolutely do not say yes to something like that.
I guess if she was getting a lot of calls about also like people that wanted to give information and testimony, she probably was more open to calling that. But
okay, I'll give you that. And then I feel like we need to talk about George, her boyfriend. We don't get really much backstory on him. He just moves into the house next door. He's revving his motorcycle.
It says, hey, I want to babysit your kids.
And then just all of a sudden, like, basically moves into her house, even though I guess he still lives next door. And she just trusts him to watch her 3 kids 24/7 with no, like, where are you from? How's it going? Like, what do you do? Who are you?
Why do you so aggressively want to watch my kids?
And he's just super chill. And like, but he's like, oh, I don't work, like, unless I have to. There is just a lot of sketchiness there that I don't love.
Yeah, I also can't imagine people unironically dressed like that with the USA headband, the mutton chops, and like the biker jacket. Just, I can't imagine people actually doing that. It just seems like such a caricature. But I guess that was early 90s biker lifestyle.
So. Yeah, but I couldn't get
These
over.
look like Rex from Napoleon Dynamite.
I haven't seen that movie in so long. I can't even remember who you're talking about.
The karate guy.
We've got to add that. I mean, I've seen it a couple times, but like, it's been a long time.
Coming soon on Culture Night.
Oh God. So yeah, I just couldn't get over him just full-time taking care. As a stay-at-home mom, taking care of children is exhausting. And to just be like, oh yeah, I'll watch your kids. That's not something you just like do.
Yeah.
You have to really be passionate about that. Yikes. And then I wonder if it would be different if this had happened today with like media involvement. If they would have tried to like use getting the media involved. I mean, I know they did kind of mention it after I made this note that like if the media got wind of like, oh, people are getting sick, like stuff is happening, if that would have swayed something or made things play out differently because of how like we use the media as such a pawn in society now. Yeah,
I guess it depends. Like going back to the whole could it be made today, like if the lawsuit and all that scandal was actually happening today, not her life happening today, it would have been different. Getting the media involved would be a card to play. However, then you have to make sure they're not destroying evidence. And when the evidence would have been on emails with a server they own that they could have then deleted, plays differently than us just sending it down to Joe in the mailroom to go shred this and make sure it's not all there. It would have been definitely played out differently in the modern day. But I think the lawyers wouldn't have just like immediately been like, oh, the newspaper and the media is totally going to solve all this, because it does
for sure
give them more time to then push back and appeal and destroy more electronic records.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting that there was no like coverage of this. And I feel like something like this almost would come about because of the media. Like, oh, we've all been really sick. And X happened.
It was the biggest class action lawsuit then, so I feel like maybe the cultural impact wasn't this movie, but more
societal,
like class action and taking on these big companies, knowing that even though you're just one person that was, trying to take this on, when it affects a community and you can all sue together, you can hurt the company even if it doesn't necessarily benefit you as much. I think they got millions out of it. I still think they were kind of shorted on that because...
And not everybody would have gotten millions if, I mean...
It wasn't all split evenly, yeah.
Anyways.
Nowadays you get your, $4 check from a class action lawsuit, but...
True. So I wrote bold and sassy because I've thought this from the very beginning. Erin Brockovich is something. I don't know how accurate it is to the real person. I assume it's based in some kind of
I
fact.
can't wait to hear her thoughts on it
But
and like how involved
she
she was.
just comes in guns a-blazing all the time. And that is something I am not at all. So it's just feel like it stuck out a lot to me because, I mean, she just says what's on her mind. And I mean, I think a lot of stuff, but I do not say a lot of things. And, oh, she was something.
Yeah, she definitely goes in, seeking confrontation. And not that I totally avoid confrontation, but I'm not going to seek out confrontation like that
absolutely
with
not.
other people.
But also for being so aggressive in a lot of ways, she's also so compassionate to like really listening to people's story, how much she cares about the little girl who has cancer and just like how much she feels for these people. You really like, can't help but champion for her when, if you just saw the like aggressive side, you'd probably not like her as much, but she's something, that's for sure. Obviously she's made a name for herself. There was a award-winning movie made after her. And then when her and George were in the fight and he had the earrings or whatever for her and she told him to stay and he said, for what? Or like, what for? I just feel like if you've been spending probably close to a year with this woman's kids, wouldn't you like maybe stay for her kids?
I mean, this is obviously
you've
movie
developed,
and it's all kind of boiled down to that one scene, but I imagine he probably is very conflicted about it and loves the kids and loves, obviously being with her. But at the same time, he also is a human and it's not his kids. He's like doing this out of the kindness of his heart, essentially. And, this could have been, argument or confrontation like number 9 about the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I know that there's a lot of layers to all of that, but I also just imagine that at that point when they said that, like, you've developed this relationship with these kids for like a pretty significant amount of time, and to just leave, I feel like would just be so hard. Obviously the relationship is hard and it was hard circumstances with her working all the time. I understand all of that, but I could see where she was coming from of like, stay, my kids love you. That
it's also got to be a lot more satisfying when you can leave and ride off on your motorcycle.
Very true. That is very movie-esque. Is the like, oh, let me just rev up my motorcycle, drive off. And then my last note, which is kind of silly, is that she wore several shirts that had like monogrammed names on them that were not her own. And obviously you didn't pay attention to it by the look on your face, but she had one that I think that said like Buddy, and then she was in the scene at the end where they were going to the Jensen house to tell them how much money they won. She was wearing another one. In the back it said like Slum Dogs or like something really weird on the back, and then it said Slim, I believe, on the front. I'm gonna fact check myself on all those names because I don't actually remember them.
Maybe
but
they were
it was almost like bowling shirts.
Yeah, maybe they were actually like people that died and they were paying, tribute to them in the movie.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It was just something I picked up on because I was like, that's not her name.
That we saw in the credits for her. Then they obviously put some thought into these outfits.
Yeah, we'll see if there's anything on the interwebs about that. So those are my notes. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so moving on to my notes. My first note that I had was in the beginning is that cars used to be a lot uglier. I
will say that I pay attention so much to the vehicles in movies, especially because we've been jumping around so much from different decades. That's one of the biggest things that always jumps out to me, but they're always uglier.
And like, I know this is supposed to take, it was filmed in came out in 2000, supposed to take place in like 93. This is probably like a 10-year-old car. So, 1980s, early 80s car that she was driving in the beginning, but it just was so ugly. And like, maybe nowadays like clear coats look better and just they put more thought into the design. But I just can't imagine having like made that car and looking around, being like, I am proud to have be the designer of this car, this like really ugly, boxy,
orange car.
Just,
I appreciate this note a lot because it's always something I notice in the older movies is I always think, man, cars were so much uglier.
And I feel like cars have changed over the last like decade or two, but not as much as I feel like they did from like the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, like each of those decades versus the last 23 years. It seems like it's kind of slowed down a bit. And now they're just going for the more like angled vibes. But just feel like those cars just were ugly. And even brand new must have not been very attractive.
Yeah. What did her car look like? Brand new, fresh off the line.
We talked about her attire at the law office and working there and everything. Just seemed like, I don't know. It's one thing to wear whatever you want and to be casual, but it's another thing to be like, I'm going to wear a see-through outfit at a professional law firm.
Yeah. Even, I mean, I could get over cleavage and stuff, but to wear a like literal see-through blouse.
Yeah, I just felt like some like Pretty Woman was like bleeding over into this movie.
Yeah. And like, I mean, obviously as a woman, and I also just like not a huge fan of big cleavage type style for myself. But I feel like, yes, you can have your own personal style, but there is a level of professionalism to a certain extent of like, you are meeting with people, you are like putting yourself out there.
You're trying to get them to trust you and to respect you and like think that you are going to do right by them and to, I don't know, just show that you don't care or that.
I mean, I don't expect her to dress like that.
Take yourself seriously.
The other lawyer at the end, the other woman lawyer who she makes a lot of very funny jokes about her style. But I mean, even the quote where he was like, well, you're one of the girls. Like, how come you're not at lunch? And it was like, well, like maybe just like don't put yourself out there. I don't know.
But also the fact that she was on like such thin ice to begin with, if like she kind of talked her way into getting a job there, and then she's immediately like cussing people out and making like, you know, rude remarks and being very aggressive. If you're on that thin ice, I can see why she wasn't like employed very long in other places. It's one thing to like still be yourself and to still speak out, but it just seemed like she was almost like self-sabotaging in a way.
And I mean, at least the character in the movie, not speculating about the real person, was like, you know, like I've got 3 kids to feed. Like I've got to keep this job, blah, blah, blah. Well, then maybe like dress a little bit more professionally, keep a little bit of your own style, but like show that you want to be there and that you want to kind of
wear a
fit
pantsuit, but you don't also want to look like you just,
walked in off the street.
Exactly.
And like talk to people nicely. I mean, like obviously she showed, like we said, she showed a lot of compassion for people, but like be a little bit more professional.
And I get it being like, oh, they can relate to me because I am like them, but still seem to like a bit of a stretch. I was just caught off guard by how many files and just plain paper they have. And to try to cross-reference that, I can see why lawyers just were so exhausted. It's got to be so nice nowadays to just have everything electronic and be like, I'm going to literally just in 3, keys have searched for this in a document, as opposed to let me go ahead and compile all this and go down to the waterboard facility and get waterboarded by how many papers are there to look through them and try to figure out and remember what all I've read to figure out all these connections. To now just say, I'm going to go ahead and just, type in a word. And now I see all these documents, all these papers, everything instantly. The history of this whole town. Yeah. It's just so different now.
I mean, I definitely paid attention to the number of boxes and files, even at the water board, like how I was like, how is she ever going to find what she's looking for here? But I don't think I fully brought it full circle of how much easier it would be today. Like significantly easier to find anything. Not just like
physically like grabbing them, but then not even to copy them. You just take the files and being able to search through them and correlate.
And like how much less driving probably too. How much is that is just on the internet and you can stay at your desk and look for a lot of that stuff?
Yeah, but somehow lawyers make more now. I thought nowadays, like that first woman that they talked to that kind of sparked this case, she was in denial that this company would have been in the wrong, that they could have possibly, lied to her or misled her about the safety of this chemical. She's like, oh, they talked to me. Nowadays, and maybe it's because of this case and because of the press that it got and the cultural impact of that, nowadays he would be like, I'm not feeling great. I'm pretty sure I'm being poisoned by a big conglomerate. That now,
especially if like your neighbors are moving away. Sell. Like if it seemed like it was a decent community, like 600 and some people, that if you're hearing like, oh, like someone in my family has cancer. Oh, you have cancer too. Oh, and you have cancer too. And like, oh, you have nosebleeds and you have nosebleeds. You would have to put all those pieces together.
Especially once it goes on Facebook, people would be like, oh yes, I'm convinced there's a big conspiracy. But yeah, I feel like nowadays, once you've had like 2 cases of anything, you'd be very much on board with like someone telling you, hey, we think we have evidence that this company is totally gaslighting you and has poisoned you, and they're in the wrong. They'd be like, yes, sign me up. How much money am I going to get out of this?
But they gave them a pamphlet.
True.
So they couldn't be in the wrong.
Honestly, if someone like put in the effort to make a pamphlet, I would believe them too. I made a note of Harvey Dent, who is what Aaron Eckhart played in The Dark Knight. It's just kind of it was a funny reversal as opposed to him being like the big lawyer, hotshot guy in The Dark Knight, which obviously you haven't seen the Batman movies.
I think I've seen Dark Knight.
He plays like this big suave, like, you know, sweet talking guy. But in this, he's like, instead of the lawyer, he's the biker guy with the mutton chops and the USA bandana. It just was
chunky bracelets and the
like
chain on his wallet.
Yeah. Just a very funny reversal there. Were these people getting their water from somewhere else during all of this? Like they knew this was going on, but they're offering coffee. They're all hanging out, living in these houses. I feel like I would have like immediately moved away or been like, yeah, I'm going to need all distilled water.
Yeah. I mean, she immediately, once she starts to kind of realize, she's like, girls, get out of the pool.
And she grows a freaking garden.
Continues to live in this house and just be there. And then she's like, but all my scans were benign and I was not expecting this one to have cancer. If you've had that many tumors, that you've had multiple, like, oh, it was benign, that like, oh, now I'm surprised I have cancer. How are you surprised?
Yeah.
Because you didn't move away. Like, I understand. I mean, I understand in the beginning where she's like, I don't want to move. Like, it's exhausting. We have 2 kids. Like, we've got a lot going on. I understand that hassle. But once you start to hear about all the ways that this could be impacting your health, I'd be like, I'm getting out of here. Even if I have to live in a hotel for a little bit, I'm not drinking this water, bathing in this water, cooking with this water. No way.
I just can't imagine, like, especially because she immediately goes and gets the kids out of that pool because she's like, oh my God, it's the water that could be poisoning them. But then still lives there and grows a garden and all that with the water from this place. And they've all, you know, talked about how it could, you know, get into the supply and it can alter your DNA and impact all sorts of, like, I would have, and as soon as someone like said that to me, I feel like I would be like, you know, not able to breathe right and be coughing and just like
I felt like I was holding my breath just watching it.
It was like watching that Chernobyl documentary where like I'm watching it and I'm holding my own breath because I just feel so sketchy. Yep. If someone said that in real life, was like, oh yeah, the water here, by the way, is going to give you every cancer ever, I'd be like, yeah, so I'm going to go, you know, a couple miles out of town and buy some distilled water and never come back. The scene where she was kind of sick and they went to this town hall and she's coughing and they're all in this big like room and they're like waving fans. It's all so hot and congested in there. I just, having gone through the pandemic, it was just so weird. Like if we had watched this movie in the year 2020, especially like in like this time of year, like March, April timeframe, I feel like I would have been even more stressed than I was watching Chernobyl of like, oh my God, there's people like together, they're in a room, she's coughing, someone's sick, like there's gonna be a pandemic, not to mention the fact that like there's all this, you know, stuff leaching into the water. But
I mean, even
it's so different watching that
when she comes into the office sick and he pulls her into this room and closes the door. I'm like, you're closing yourself in there, which is not something I probably would have thought twice about a couple of years ago. But and I'm not a germaphobe by any means, but I definitely view and think of things so much differently now.
I mean, if I were her and I was working this case and I'd been to this town so many times and I got the slightest bit of like the sniffles, I would be like, oh, it's lung cancer, I'm dying.
Yep. I would have been like, add me to this lawsuit.
I wouldn't be like, oh no, it's probably a common cold. I'd be like, oh no, this is the worst type of every cancer.
Oh, for sure. And she was so nonchalantly going in and out of there, drinking their coffee. No, thank you.
I thought $330 million for a $28 billion company was a bit light. That's just that's like, you know, the cost of doing business for them. That wasn't a punishment. And I don't know if these class action lawsuits have gotten any more teeth in like since then. I doubt they have. But it just seemed like a really light punishment. Like, hey, by the way, you totally broke all sorts of EPA laws, regulations, guidelines, and, you know, completely destroyed a community so that you could
600 plus
so you could make a couple bucks. And we're going to go ahead and charge you like less than 1% of your, you know, yearly revenue. Probably just seemed like it was not a harsh enough punishment. Didn't necessarily need to go directly to those people, but it just seemed like you shouldn't benefit from that.
Yeah, I agree.
And finally, we're watching the credits with a lot of.
He was watching it with so much attention. He wouldn't let me turn him off. He was committed.
So I just want to give a shout out since we covered the Best Boy in our behind the screen segment earlier. A shout out to the Best Boy Electric, Frank Endewart. The Best Boy... Oh, shit, I think I got this wrong. Best Boy Grip, maybe? There were 3 Best Boys. There was Frank Endewart, Dave...
That's not the
autocorrected. Turkey, I think it was something like that.
Oh, man, we were totally going to give them really good credit, and we just ruined it.
And Rodney Vito, curse you, autocorrect. Frank, Dave... Frank, Dave, and Rodney, thank you so much for your work as Best Boys.
You were the best boys.
I really hope that you all were best men in each other's weddings, because you are the best men that I have ever seen on this set.
Oh.
So
I will say, I feel like this is the first time I've ever paid attention to the fact that there were multiple Best Boys. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that we had a little bit of a background that there could be more than one. I was kind of surprised there were 3. Mm-hmm. And I hope you give us a little... I think
there were so many sets in this too. I'm
True.
I'm intrigued interested in how much like work you had to do when it's so many different sets versus like a much smaller,
like a Breakfast Club. We're at the school.
Yeah, you had to put together all of that set, and you put a lot of work into it. Versus we're filming outside a house that already existed and it's natural lighting, all that. How much work goes into one versus the other? I can see each having their own challenges, but you guys did good.
Yes,
you did best.
I was going to say they didn't do good; they did best.
Yeah.
Also, one more quick note is I feel like, or 2 more quick notes. The way this was filmed, whether it was like the videography or just the general setting of it, gave me a lot of first season OC vibes when they go to Chino.
Because it was in California.
I mean, it probably has a little bit to do with it, but just like where Ryan was from, and they're like,
I see that.
I don't know. Some of that was.
I did kind of note to myself in the beginning that the scenes did seem a bit blown out, though, in the beginning. Just with the exposure, and especially with some of the panning, felt like it was turning a bit too fast for the frame rate. It seemed like it was kind of jerky, but
I did notice that they were following her car, and I was like, "Ooh,
that was kind of like smooth." I guess it wasn't as noticeable later in the movie, or maybe I just kind of got used to the style. But I noticed that in the beginning, and especially at the that university.
Yes, definitely there too. And then my last note is that it was rated R, and I feel like I can see why it was rated R. I mean, because she's really aggressive with her language. I don't know if that... I feel like PG-13 probably would have been fine.
PG-13 seems like it fits. I wonder if they just said, like, fuck one too many times.
And that she really just put it out there a lot, but...
I know there like is a limit on that. That it seemed like it was kind of towing the line, and it was closer to a PG-13 to an R. I agree.
Yeah. And so, yeah, anything else you have to add?
Nope.
All right. So if you are enjoying this podcast, if you could rate and review or subscribe on YouTube
and like and
all those things, that would really mean a lot to us, so that we can keep doing what we're doing and know that there are people out there watching this. And if you have any movie suggestions or genres that you think we should watch, if you want to drop a comment on the YouTube video or message us or comment on our Instagrams or Twitters, we check all the things. Our Twitters. God, I sound like such an old person.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I've had a Twitter since like 2009. I'm not that old. If you want to drop a DM, slip into my DMs on Twitter. Never mind, don't do that. You can also email us at culturenightpod@gmail.com. And speaking of social media, if you want to stay up to date on what we're watching, what we're drinking every week, all the behind the scenes stuff on our stories, you can follow us at Culture Night Pod on Instagram and at Culture Night Pod on Twitter.
And YouTube.
And at Culture Night Pod on YouTube. And
we're not on Mastodon, but we're on pretty much everything else at this point.
Yes. So yeah, just follow us, comment, like, share.
Yep.
Yes, share with your friends.
We'll catch you next week.
That was episode 12. Cheers.